Thank you. Colleagues, please allow me to introduce the next speaker, Mr. NELVIS QEKEMA, who is the Director of the Content Development and Speech Writing at the Department of Science and Innovation. He studied law and philosophy at the University of the Western Cape, where he also became the national president of AZAPO. He is now the current AZAPO president. Over to you, Mr. QEKEMA. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Program Director. And indeed, my name is NELVIS QEKEMA, and I remain a political activist. I'm very proud of that. You know, I can't do any other way. Now, let me start at the beginning and just thank the organizers of this conference. It is a very bold one. I looked at the program and I was saying to myself, how did this come about in South Africa? You have a program of this nature. Is this a university? And indeed it is a university. And then it's a university that produced the legends of Africa. And so to the organizers, thank you very much for taking the risk and the trouble to invite me. Thank you very much. And what is the time? Good morning. Without much ado, my topic addresses the issue of demobilization and immobilization as a phenomenon in post-independence South Africa. So I'm dealing with the issues of demobilization and immobilization within the context of democracy, within the context, you know, of freedom. I'm dealing with those issues. These are the issues that I'm going to deal with briefly. And let me just relate a story to you. You all know this story, and then it's a tired story. It's a cliche. It's tired. And I'm relating this story to you because when I'm looking at you, because this is a university, definitely you are the intelligentsia. Yes, you are the intelligentsia. But after we've said we are the intelligentsia, there's another question that must be asked. Are you the reactionary intelligentsia or the revolutionary intelligentsia? Because you can't just say you are the intelligentsia and you leave it there. There is a problem. Once you leave it there, then there is a problem. Because you will be an intelligentsia that goes anywhere and even against your people, including yourself. Because you may have imbibed a lot that is anti-you, and because you are not a revolutionary intelligentsia, you do not have the mechanism or the antidote that is able to deal with the poison that you may have imbibed in all these kind of places. So are you the reactionary intelligentsia or the revolutionary intelligentsia? Here is the tired story. They talk about this story, which you know very well, and this is a story about an astronomer. They are somewhere, and in the forest or open space, and of course, an astronomer is an important person. So an astronomer has got to be having an assistant. And you know what an assistant. Once I talk about an astronomer and an assistant, you know what is happening there. You're talking about the educated and probably the non-educated. You know what I'm talking about. And you're going to see as we're going forward, as you are sitting there, I have not told you, but already you know what color is the astronomer and what color is the assistant. I haven't told you, and I'm not responsible of that. But the reason you know, even before I have told you, it tells you about something we are going to talk about this morning. I haven't told you, but you know the color of these people. I haven't told you. You even know what they look like. I haven't told you. You even know what their attitudes are to each other. I haven't told you about that. You even know where the astronomer lives, and you know where the assistant lives. I haven't told you about that. How come you know, but I haven't told you? How come? Ask yourself that question. We're going to talk about that. Socialization. Indoctrination. We're going to talk about that. But in this story, it's overnight and they are sleeping. And somewhere in the middle, and then the astronomer is speaking to his assistant and starts saying, hey, look at the stars. Wow! And you know, astronomers, you know, the Milky Ways, the galaxies and all the things and the shooting stars, excited about what he is seeing, analyzing what this means. Wow, look at that. Wow, look at the shooting. Look at analyzing this kind of things. He's excited about them. Very excited about them. Of course, he's an astronomer. He's got to be excited about that. And then after he does all this thing, and the assistant is emotionless, not even moved. And then he begins to look at the assistant and says, hey man, what do you make of this? And then the assistant says, our tent is stolen. Our tent is stolen. So you are able to see the stars, the galaxies, the Milky Way, because our tent is stolen. We have forgotten that we are sleeping inside a tent. The fact that you are able to see all that we are seeing, our tent has been stolen while we are asleep. That's what we're going to talk about this morning, that our tent is stolen. Whilst you are busy with all the things that you are busy about, our tent is stolen. Our land is stolen. Our dignity is stolen. Our humanity is stolen. Our values and value systems stolen. Our culture stolen. We are left with nothing. Yes, the galaxies, but our tent is stolen. Now my topic talks about demobilization, and then there is also immobilization there. It's important that we understand what we are talking about, because immediately you talk about immobilization, you are talking about stopping something in its tracks. That's what you are talking about. You are immobilizing it. You want no movement, no mobility. It is trapped. It is stationary. It is stranded. It is stopped from moving. That's what you are talking about. Immobilization. And we are talking about immobilization within the context of democracy, within the context of freedom. We're talking about demobilization. Once you talk about demobilization, you are talking about standing down an army. If you are a general, you are fighting a war for whatever. Once you demobilize, it is when you say to your soldiers, there is no fighting anymore. Not just no fighting, but go home, go to the barracks, go elsewhere. Why? Either because you have won the war, or the matter may have been resolved, the matter of conflict. That is demobilization. But we've got to talk about these things. And I want to talk about these things within the theory or the model provided by the Italian Marxist Antonio Gramsci. You know him very well about his prison notes, which we wrote when he was in prison. And during that time, was when you are in prison, and then when you are just from wall to wall, wall this side, wall down to the sides, and you are able to be creative. And then he was able to write the prison notes. And in those prison notes, he was able to develop the theory of the cultural hegemony. The cultural hegemony. And Gramsci talks about how the ruling class is able to hold in shackles the whole society, to hold in shackles the whole classes, social classes of society, the whole social groups of society, the whole people, the whole masses of society. He says they use the instrument or the tool of cultural hegemony. That is the ruling class. And he says, as the time went on, the ruling class realized that we can no longer, hold the people in bondage using violence, not anymore. Now what you need to do, the ruling class then moves into the space of ideas. It moves into the space of, discourse. It moves into the space of, values. It moves into the space of beliefs and belief systems, the value systems, and then it insinuates itself there. And then in no time, you begin to see whatever society thinks is what the ruling class thinks. Whatever society thinks is what the ruling class thinks. You think like the ruling class without knowing it. You walk, sit, smile, eat like the ruling class without you knowing it. To an extent of even developing within yourself, and it is built in through socialization and indoctrination, self-censure. You move to a level where once you begin to say anything that is against the thinking and the ideas of the ruling class, you yourself begin to see, no, I'm beginning to sound stupid. Nobody tells you, you begin to sound stupid. And then when you say it amongst your people, and then everyone laughs at you, how stupid you look, how stupid you feel, because the ruling class, through this cultural hegemony, does it in a manner that everything becomes self-evident. Everything becomes a reality that is unquestionable. If you question it, you isolate yourself from society. And then Carter Woodson is talking about this phenomenon in his book, The Miseducation of the Negro. Woodson talks about a situation where he says, if throughout your life, when you move into a space, the people in power have made it into your mind, insinuated themselves into your mind such that you know where now you are not worthy of getting into this hall through the front door. You know it. He says you will know it even when there is no longer anybody standing at the door to push you back. You will know it. You will know that you don't belong getting through the front door. He says you will go where you always go through. You will go and go round and round, round and round, and even try and avoid in a difficult way the obstacles until you get through the back door, the very small, narrow back door, because that is your place. Because you know that that is your place, and through self-censure you know that you cannot get through the front door, and nobody is standing there to chase you away. You know it yourself through socialization and indoctrination, through a system of incentives and disincentives. You know it. Woodson says, even if you got there and you no longer find the small and narrow door you used to get through it, he says you will find one. If it is not there, you will work on it and open one for yourselves to get inside, because you know you cannot get through the front door. And here we are talking about the invisibility of blackness. Because you cannot be amongst human beings because you are not a human being. You are a sub-human being, and you have accepted that. And you even when you are through the back door, you know your place. And nobody is there to tell you about your place. You know your place. Cultural hegemony. How the ruling class does it. All of you here, you know your place. I don't have to tell you. I don't care, even if you're a rector here, you know your place. You know your place. Even if you're a doctor, you know your place. You go into a hospital and everyone thinks you are a patient when you are a doctor. Because you've got to be sick. How can you not be sick when your circumstances are sickening? How can you not be sick? And when you are... Professor Musala, my comrade, my former president, he told us one day at UCT, and then he said he was the chief invigilator at that exam, chief invigilator. And then here, as he's coming in, and a white colleague who is also an invigilator was standing there, says, come on, you're late, take a seat. And says, I'm the chief invigilator. I am the chief invigilator. I am a professor, but a professor of professors. I'm the chief invigilator, but an invigilator who reports to me by virtue of my color, he, she, or she knows my place. God, you've got to be a student, you can't be a professor. It is not only that, you yourself as a black professor, when you are sitting amongst, I'm not saying white, when you are sitting amongst professors, as a black professor, you know that you are a black professor and you know that you are there to listen. Because you are self-censure. You are always not sure what I'm saying is the right thing to say. Self-censure. Your role is there to clap when other people say what you ought to have said and what you know. Even when you write what you know, you've got to be told that, hey, come on, and I apologize for this. What is your authority for that? Because you cannot know that. You can't know that. How come? How on earth you know that? What is your authority? I'm sitting there with my pen. If you don't tell me my authority, because you cannot know this. You've got to tell me your authority. And you know who the authority is. I'm not going to tell you. Cultural hegemony. I can't tell you. Let me move quickly and tell you about the same Gramsci, the Gramscian model or theory of manufacturing consent. I know that Herman and Chomsky also talk about it, but within the media space. But Gramsci is talking about it within the important space. Manufacturing consent. What we are talking about here is manufacturing consent. The way the ruling class rules is such that it doesn't have to be there. They don't have to be there. If you are there as Ramaphosa, you know what to do. They don't have to look over you, nor do they have to look over their shoulder. You know your role. Manufacturing consent. And to an extent that people have even forgotten to understand that there is a difference between the ruling class and the ruling party. And today, everyone makes a mistake of thinking the ruling party, the ANC, is the ruling class. No! The ANC is not the ruling class. The ANC, it is the ruling party, and it is ruling in accordance to the wishes of the ruling class. Because you are not going to do your own thing. You are going to do it in the way that the ruling class says you must do it. And they will not be there. You know what to do. Now, talking about this cultural hegemony, talking about this manufacturing, consent manufacturing, you already know what you ought to be doing in your role. That's why I can ask you here. If I ask you here, what color is the zebra? You all know, don't you? You do. Because the color of the zebra is black and white, don't you? Yes, you know that. And yet it is not true that the zebra is black and white. The zebra is not black and white. I'm telling you this morning. Why are you not exclaiming? Because I'm telling you that the zebra is not black and white, but the zebra is black with white stripes. Yet, all of you here are professors, doctors, but you know that the zebra is black and white, and you don't question it. Because why? Because it is self-evident. Why? Self-evident. Who said it is self-evident? Who said? Because whatever is self-evident, that's exactly what we must quarrel with. Critical thinking, intellectual engagement space. We must question everything, even when we think it is right. We must even question ourselves when we think we are right, and we ask ourselves, why are we right? And for who are we right? On whose point of view is anything right? We must ask those questions. Critical thinking, intellectual engagement space. You even think the sky is blue, yet it is not blue. It is an appearance that it is blue, and it is through the manufacture, the molecules, the scattering of light by the molecules and the gases, which makes the sky appear to be blue, not blue. Yet you are sitting here, all of you think the sky is blue. We are sitting here, we are not questioning ourselves, where did we get the language that the sun sets and the sun rises? When we were told that by science, that the world is, the universe is heliocentric. Where do we get the language that contradicts the heliocentricity of the universe? Wasn't Galileo killed and lynched because he was questioning the geocentricity of the universe at that point in time? How can the sun rise? How can the sun set when the sun stands still and stationary, and we know it is the bodies of the planets that move on? Look, I'm not changing anything. Don't stop saying the sun sets. But I'm saying be critical. Ask how come this is so. And that is why even those who wrote the Bible, they wrote into Joshua that Joshua must go and say to the Israelites that God has commanded me to command the earth to stand still. As an example that he was a man of God. He commanded, because that's what God told him according to the Bible. But didn't God know that? There is no reason to command the sun to stand still. Command the earth to stand still. I got you there, because that's the matter that deals with you very closely. I got you there. And that's exactly what we want to question, the matters and the beliefs that are close to us. Because we want to know what are the origins of those beliefs and who inserted those beliefs into our minds, into our hearts. That's exactly what we are questioning. Now, we were talking this morning, I was listening. They're talking about the Constitution, and all of you are talking about the Constitution. Why? Because you're lawyers. And because you're the lawyers, you know, presumably, the Constitution more than anybody else. But I'm telling you this, and all of you, remember, I studied law decades ago. I've forgotten it now. Now, I don't know it, let me confess. Now, but I knew, when I was a student of law, I knew how proud I was about what? About what? The law of the land. The law of the land. Which land are you talking about? Which land are you talking about? The law of the land. It was in my heart, I didn't question it. The law of the land. Which land? Where is that land? And who owns that land right now? The law of the land. Because that land is owned by the ruling class. Who is that ruling class? The law of the land. You are talking about the law. Which law? And what is law? The law is a set of rules and systems that meets out punishment to those who do not respect the property of the ruling class, the landlords. You've got to know that. If you do not respect that, you're in trouble. That's the law you are talking about, the law of the land. You must apply the law as is. I used to know that. The law is, I didn't question it, the law is applied as is. What nonsense is that? How can you apply it as is when the law is class-based based, when the law is class biased and you do not belong to the law, so you do not belong to the class that created the law, how can you apply that law as is? Because that law is not yours. That law is meant to shackle and strangulate you. Why do you apply it as is? And I'm telling you that even the constitution that we're talking about, because when they were using the Westminster system, we know that a parliament was supreme, and that was changed. And now the constitution, and you are all proud and clapping, it is the supreme law of the land. What law? And which land? What law and which land and whose law and who created the law? Because even those who are in parliament are creating the law within the system. They're not creating any law they wish to create is within the system, there are parameters. Why am I telling you? I am telling you, if you have forgotten, that the constitution you are talking about, it is a constitution whose genesis was in 1993. And then it was created, well, of course, the Codesa 1 failed, Codesa 2 failed, and all of you are still talking about when we have problems. We must move into a Codesa. We must move. Well, Codesa failed. Can I remind you? Codesa failed dismally. That's why it was discarded, and they used the multi-party negotiation process. Because, but what did they do there? Those people who were there, at that point in time, there were about 26 parties, and the majority of those parties were the parties that toed the line of the apartheid regime. So the parties of the people were outnumbered numerically, but even culturally within that space. Do you wonder why, at that point in time, they were able to create and develop, you have forgotten it, constitutional principles? There were 34. In 1993, there is no 1994, there's no democracy by then. I'm telling you that the constitutional principles that shackles the constitution that we have were conceived inside the womb of the racist and settler colonial regime. That's what I'm telling you. Where the settler colonial regime outnumbers the people's organizations. And that is why those 34 principles, remember I'm telling you another law principle again, that the people who were making those constitutional principles did not have a mandate from the people. Yeah, you are lawyers, you know that. They did not have, you cannot move into AZAPO or ANC, they come. No, we don't have a mandate from the people. It is us and our organization who decide we must come together into this space, and then when we come together without a popular mandate, and then we craft 34 constitutional principles, and we say the constitution that will be written by the democratic government shall not deviate from this 34 principle. How on earth can that be? How on earth can that be? So all of us are excited that in 1996 we now had a constitution, but that People's Parliament, which now reconstituted itself into a constitutional assembly, did nothing. There was no writing of a constitution, I'm telling you. Because the constitution had already been written. To the extent the constitution was written, there was also a constitutional court that made it a point that if you write anything that goes against the constitutional principles, the constitutional court will not certify that constitution or that piece of writing. I'm not sure if we are together here. I'm telling you about the constitution that we say it is the best in the world. Go and see in the Bill of Rights, when it comes to housing, it is not talking about the right to housing. It is not. Go there. It is not talking about the right to housing. Why? Who needs housing in this country? You know who needs housing, but it is not talking about the right to housing. Why? Because it was written by the people who did not need housing. Even though who look like the people who need housing. Okay, let me leave that one. Let me leave that one. But go and read it, you will find that it is talking about a right of access to housing. Not a right to housing. You guys are very clever, lawyers. You're very clever. You knew why you wrote it like that. And that's the reason why this government has never ever provided housing to anybody. It's shacks and Western shacks. That's not housing, if you know the definition of a house. There is no space in that housing. A man as tall as I am cannot walk into that house. I can't. And yet it is tall. There is a reason why architects say that a roof must be higher and higher at that level. There is a reason why. It's not a mistake. They know why. They say because the fumes and all the things, they must be able to circulate and get out. And then with me, as tall as I am, the fumes and everything bad is here within me. In fact, I'm crouching. No! That's a reason. That's the reason why, even in my house, I have a very long lamp suspended on a chain, and yet I can't, because when I walk in, I've got to, because that lamp is there. Because it was not designed for what is not a house, it was designed for a house. Yes. And let me leave, I'm going to talk too many things. But I'm here to tell you, when you are talking about a constitutional democracy and you are a lawyer, you've got to ask yourself, what is a constitution? And then who wrote this? And for who? When you are a lawyer and then they say this is democracy, you've got to ask yourself, what is democracy? Because you should know that any law is class-based and class-biased. When you talk about democracy, you should also know that any democracy is class-based and class-biased. So when you're talking about democracy, you should ask yourself, whose democracy is this? To which class does this democracy belong? If you're a lawyer, you should know that constitutions are designed in a manner that they lock out democracy. Yes, I've said it. Constitutions are designed by a few people who ensure that the majority are not going to get in here. That's why they have the entrenched clauses and double entrenched clauses, so that whatever you say, even if I'm not here, even if Cyril Ramaphosa ruling, but they are entrenched and double entrenched clauses, that locks out democracy. It doesn't matter what the people say. Now let me rush and sit down and say that that's the reason that even in Parliament, when we go in Parliament, the people must understand, when you are in Parliament, the people in Parliament, the people's representatives, so-called, are there, but do they ever report to the people? Do they ever take their mandate from the people? When last do you see them? What does that do? Those people are within a system created within the doctrine and paradigm of cultural hegemony and then manufactured consent, what Paulo Freire says it is the imprisoned reality. It is a reality, but it is an imprisoned reality. When you think within the imprisoned reality as a prisoner, never able to get. That is why the masses of this country have got to be able to pursue the struggle outside Parliament, because the masses of this country, citizen activism must be able to set the agenda for the parliamentarians. We must set the agenda for the. Now, when you talk about, I'm talking about demobilisation and immobilization. Look even at the language that is used before I sit down. The language that is used. And all of you say it. I'm telling you, I'm sitting down. Now, all of you know it. I'm telling you, listen to Parliament and everyone, even journalists, even professors, doctors, and everyone, academics everywhere. Pushing the barriers of poverty. What is that? What does that mean? Pushing the barriers of poverty. What does that mean? We don't push the barriers of poverty, we eradicate them. We don't push them a little bit, the margins. We don't. the historically disadvantaged. What is historical about our disadvantage? What is historical? But it is there in the books and everything. It is there. We are the historically disadvantaged. What is historical about our disadvantage? And so, Marikana, I am saying these things and these few things to you to say, having said what I've said, do you now wonder why Marikana had to happen? Marikana happened within the context of cultural hegemony, manufacturing of consent. White people were not there. Of course, I saw one, but really he was also not there. Because the people, instructions and everything were black people to kill black people, instructed by black politicians. And then all those things were discussed within the premises of Longming. Longming, the London, based mineral whatever. There were no white people there. It was us. And then we ordered 4 mortuary vans to be able to load about 32 dead bodies before they were dead. But they knew that they were going to kill at the very least 32, and they ordered 4 mortuary vans. They were going to load 32 black bodies. Not only that, how were they going to load them? They ordered 4,000 rounds of ammunition. Who ordered those? Black people. Within the context of cultural hegemony. After they killed them, what did they do? They even went in and then tampered with the scene and put all the, X's and things so that it appeared like these people, Who did that? Black people. To who? Black people. Even after that, when it went to court, they introduced the doctrine of common purpose, and then they wanted to charge the miners that they were responsible for their own deaths. Yes, common purpose. So that's the point that I'm making, and I'm saying I even listened to Advocate Kakana talking about, he was saying, I was listening and I was shocked. He says, law transcends ideology. There is no such a thing. I apologize, he's not here. There is no such a thing, that's nonsense. Law is a product of ideology. It can never transcend ideology. It is an instrument of ideology to pursue ideology as a servant of ideology. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. Very, very thought-provoking, I must say. You asked lots of questions, and I wonder if we are really ready to internalize them, not only as academics, but as a country, because they are, really, really thought-provoking. And you also conscientize us to the fact that we need to be aware of the systems of the ruling class that is working against us. And in the beginning you said, our tent is stolen. Our tent is stolen. How? By whom? How do we get it back? And I am sitting here listening to you, and I'm like, maybe we need to do what the Marikana miners did, because they went to fetch their tent. So you told us that it has been stolen. We know it has been stolen, but let's tap into the Marikana miners and see how they tried and went about to get it back.